Over to you, Manu.
So a very good evening and a warm and hearty welcome once again to each and every one of you who has logged into this session. We are delighted to have here back with us again today, Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor, the Associate Editor and Principal Anchor at NDTV. This is not the first time that we are having her here for this session. In fact, she has been here with us on the 5th of August, talking to us about selling news versus selling content versus providing news. Today, she will be discussing about what makes news agenda of facts. And so it is an absolutely wonderful opportunity for you, my dear students, to really make the most of the session. And in fact, ma'am herself has asked me to remind you that please do remember that if you have any questions, whether it is regarding the topic itself or whether it is about her work in the field, please do not forget to put in your questions in the chat box, and we are going to make sure that each of the questions are definitely addressed in this particular session. We also do know that ma'am is hard pressed with time, of course, so we shall do away with all other formalities and straight get down into business. But before we start, I would like to request Reverend Father Dr. Joby Joseph, the rector of our college, to kindly lead us in prayer. Over to you, Father.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Rose. I'm Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor. Once again, thank you for being here. As we begin this small session on what makes news, agenda, or facts, it is truth, as we decided last time. And I want to read a small scripture and make that as our prayer. Let's place ourselves in the presence of God. We pray for all of us who report, hear, and spread news, that we may always be guided by the truth. We pray, Lord, make me know your ways, O God. Teach me always your path of truth. Lead us always in your eternal truth, and teach me, for you are a God of light and truth. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for bringing us together once again to listen to Ma'am Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor. We pray for her undertaking, her family, and all people in the field of journalism as they take pain and take effort to bring news. May they be guided always by facts and truth, and you, the eternal guide and truth. In your precious name, Lord, we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, Father. We shall definitely start the session now. Once again, a reminder to all of you students. Some of you may be thinking about a career in journalism yourself. Some of you might be thinking about entering the media industry in general. Or for the rest of you all, it might just be an absolutely wonderful opportunity to know more about journalism and news and how the business how the profession works right from a journalist herself. So please make the most of this session. Keep dropping in whatever questions you have in the chat box. And like ma'am has already told me, right from the time that ma'am starts her session, please do remember that you can definitely put in your questions in the chat box. Also do remember that at the end of the session, you will be given a feedback form, which you'll have to fill in, and then you will be receiving your e-certificates. Before I hand over the session to Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor, I would like to read a little bit about, introduce her and read a little bit about our guest. Ms. Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor is an associate editor and principal anchor in NDTV. She started working for NDTV in 2010 and is known for her trailblazing reporting on several issues in the country. She is widely praised for her exclusive coverage of the JNU incident, where she faced extreme difficulties while trying to unravel the truth. She was the top nominee for the Asian Television Awards in Singapore for her rigorous coverage of the Nirbhaya case. For her steadfast attitude towards her work, she was awarded NT Young Journalist of the Year award. She was the moderator at FICCI, Global Young Leaders Summit in 2020 on the topic Youth, the Changing Face of Politics. She has won the ENBA Young Journalist of the Year award in 2020. Her feats and fame know no bounds, for her unfaltering dedication to her work never ceases. During this phase, besides other subjects of interest, she has been delineating about the global pandemic, vaccines, coronavirus, and its double and triple mutations, answering the questions and apprehensions of people accurately through her scrupulous research and meticulous coverage of the same on NDTV FYI. So once again, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here with us, ma'am, and over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am. As always, it's really nice to be introduced by all of you. And to Father Joseph, I have to say, speedy recovery to you. It's always lovely to start this session with a prayer as well. Sort of puts heart and head in the right place, no? Right when you get started. So thank you so much for that. And please get well soon. I, despite your recovery, the enthusiasm with which we've been preparing for this meeting is quite lovely to see. Okay, so we've got a very interesting topic in front of us today, agenda or facts, right? So I thought it'll be a good idea to sort of start by just understanding what is agenda. How do you differentiate agenda from facts? Now, agenda in the normal sense, if you say it with journalism, people often think it's the agenda of a particular party, a particular channel, but I have often sort of come back to understand in these about 12 years that I've been in this industry, in television at least for 12, and before that in print, the time that I spent, that it often boils down to individuals. For me, if there has been a compromise on facts when it comes to or pushing forward somebody's personal prejudice or agenda, etc., it is often that one person who takes that call. So every time I interact with young people, I always tell them, don't blame systems, don't blame setups and parties and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it is that one individual which is taking a call and is compromising something within to let that agenda take forward and take precedence over facts. So the job really in front of us today to have a better society, to have a better understanding, to have better people at the heart of it, to join journalism. I was when the introduction was being done, and it was, if you noticed, I won Young Journalist of the Year with a gap of like some 7-8 years in two different forums, because and the last time when I received it in 2020, I was like, really, are there no further young journalists, younger people who've entered the industry, that they have to keep giving it to me? Like, why is that happening? So I definitely, right at the onset, say that we need a lot of good people in the fraternity. So anybody getting encouraged by this conversation, I'll be very happy. Anybody wants to understand this further, I'll be very happy to guide you on that as well. But coming back to agenda versus facts. So right in the onset, if you fix it in your head and that shift in your head happens and you tell yourself that agenda is a personal agenda, agenda is a personal prejudice, it could be a confirmation bias, it could be a personal sort of hidden bias that is surfacing because now you're sitting in a position of power. It could be anything. So at the end of the day, we all know that facts should be facts. Truth is what we discussed last time around, right? That truth should be guiding us. And along with that truth comes in facts that should be guiding us as well. Now, let's understand this with a couple of examples. And I'll be happy to just listen into some conversation on the chat group as well once we do that. Let me pick up the last couple of things that really made news. We're in a COVID year and a lot of has shifted. A paradigm shift has happened even inside newsrooms and newspapers and the rest of the space. Health and healthcare, medicine, all of this has taken center stage. Also, I feel it has taken center stage because it has become drawing room conversation now. It is people who are driving that conversation. And again, I keep coming back to how people, individuals, little conversations up there change how the narrative is being built. And because now we're focusing more on health, we've got news channels and everybody else focus more on health as well. But what else did we focus on apart from COVID in this extremely tragic year? 2 years, in fact, that we've had. We focused, and please throw in your answers on the chat box. I'll take a look at them as well. I'm sure you'll say recently Aryan Khan made news. What else made news? Sushant Singh Rajput made news. What else made news? Throw me some answers. Maybe we can pick a conversation from there. Coal made news. Yeah, that's nice. Farmers' issues made news. That's also correct. Farm bills, absolutely. Lakhimpur, absolutely. Aliens, I'm not sure I follow that. Cryptocurrency, yeah, that definitely made news. We made news about that in Taliban. Okay, great. Good to know that all of you are listening in and part of this conversation on this bit. So, something that none of you mentioned, but I just want to put it out there because I really want to tell you how facts matter. GDP numbers made news, and just yesterday, India's hunger index also made news. India's hunger index, where and it came at a time when all of us were getting into this festive mode. The Shera is here, Diwali is just around the corner. Everybody wants to make merry, and then suddenly we get this global hunger index where India has dropped further in its ranking. It went from 92nd, if I'm not wrong, somewhere in the 90s to about 106 in entire kitty of 116 countries. We are worse off, according to this index, than Pakistan, than Bangladesh, even Nepal. Now, this is something that should bother you and I, right? This is something that should bother the government, first of all. The government, like we've seen in the current thing, said that, oh, we can't rely on these metrics. This is not the right methodology that so they dismissed the matrix altogether. But this was a fact. This was not agenda. And this is a good example of how this was a fact that was turned into an agenda by somebody who didn't want to see it as such. So this is one category. Let's keep boxing that. Sushant Singh Rajput, was it fact or was it agenda? Or were there bits of it, they were facts, and bits of it that was agenda? Some answers there? You're right. Father Joseph is right. It was still a mix of both. Because the fact in Sushant Singh Rajput's case was that the only fact we knew about, and perhaps the only fact we still know of over a year of what happened, that very talented life tragically lost, is that he hung himself. Is the fact that he took away his life, right? That's the only fact. The agenda that followed was what happened with Ria. So when we talk about, now going back, since you've understood how facts and agendas now place, at times particularly just facts are news, at times just agenda is news, at times there is a combination of both, and most times there is a combination of both. Let me go back to the question we're talking about today on what makes agenda or what makes news, agenda or facts. And I often go back to seeing that what makes news is what makes people talk. It is neither agenda nor facts. It is mostly what people like to discuss. The bad word to use here is gossip. When Sushant Singh Rajput's case happened, or when Aryan Khan is even unfolding with us right now, nobody cares about. I have seen when I meet people, the first thing I'm asked these days is, oh, what is this Andar ki khabar? Did he actually do it? Did he not do it? Do they care about facts? Do they have an agenda? Might not. But because people are talking about it, it often ends up being more news than it is supposed to be. Sushant, and I'm not saying this is part of the industry of fraternity, but I'm saying this is somebody who broadcasts and who puts out news every evening on the channel, and has to take a call on what exactly is the issue that I will talk about today, right? And mostly I want it to be concerning to people. So I will go back and look at trends and stuff and see, okay, what are people talking about? What are the hashtags? What is it trending online? What is it that people care about? So what do I do? I'm not saying it's the right thing or the wrong thing. I'm just telling you what is it that I do out of that information. So say Sushant's issue happened. And a lot of it, all of us know by now, after having gone through that very, very bad phase of thinking on and insinuating and really getting after a young woman's life for no reason. After all of that, we now realize, oh, it was so sad. The media made it like that. And I often want to go back and tell these people, well, weren't you discussing this when you met with your friends online, when you caught up with your friends for a coffee, or when you were talking to them? Didn't you ask them, oh, did you know? Because you care. Because, and by you, I mean because people in general care, it ends up being news. And we live in an era where people's views, opinions, all of that is very visible. It's easy for trend watchers to get a nip on it, right? To understand what is making news. So again, coming back to what I do with this information and how I'm trying to navigate my way between this agenda and news, right? I want to talk about facts. Imagine if Sushant's story was unfolding, or Aryan Khan's story is unfolding, and I start telling people our hunger index. Will anybody be watching me? And people watching me and doing coverage and doing news for eyeballs is not always a bad thing. And I'll tell you why. In fact, let's take a pause on this note. It's good to clarify this. It's not always a bad thing. It's like you making a meal which nobody's eating. It's like you making a discovery that nobody uses. It's like you making a beautiful piece of garment, but it'll never be worn. It's like making the best meal on the planet, or having made a discovery that is going to be earth-shattering for everybody, but you live in a cave and nobody gets to know about it. Is it of any use? And when it comes to news, when it comes to broadcast, that's the essence of it, right? That what you do actually reaches out to people. It's one of the reasons I became a journalist. It's one of the things that I wanted to make the right conversations and give you a thought to pause and say, there could be something here, right? And if that's your driver, how do you then separate agenda? And how do you not get driven, let me put it this way, how do you not get driven by agenda and get factored in by news? So I picked up Aryan Khan's case. It was obviously trending. Everybody was talking about it. But how do we turn this into a meaningful conversation? So I looked at the NDPS Act, and we did a full show on what exactly is NDPS Act. NDPS, for those of you who don't know, talks about, basically in very, very broad terms, puts in very clear lines what exactly is the permissible, or what kind of contraband or drugs, etc. Different quantities will involve what kind of punishment and stuff like that. And because we read in detail the NDPS Act, we spoke to people who have been previous NDPS or these Narcotic Control Bureau, NCB heads as well. And I spoke with them, invited them on the program. They told us something very interesting. They said that this entire act is completely outdated. They said how even the act in very clearly goes out to say that people who are the end users of drugs are actually victims. It goes on to talk about how if you want to solve the drug menace, and it has been seen in countries after countries where cutting down on end users does not solve the problem. You have to cut down supply. You have to cut down on the big cartels. That is what solves the problem. And the supply chain has to be back. That's where the big money is. And then you have to ask yourself the question, how is it that why is it that everybody's interested in Aryan Khan, who was found with no drugs on him, who was found with no money on him and not even on the ship and all of that, but is in news all the time, everywhere. But that 3,000 kgs of heroin that was picked up from a port was not making as much news. That 3,000 kg of heroin that was worth some 20,000 crore. Like, I don't even know how many zeros are there in that figure. That would have percolated down. And if we were to assume a scenario that Aryan Khan was consuming drugs, that 1%, 0.00000 some percent was supposed to come down to him. How is that going to solve the problem? The Act also, because we studied the Act, told us that they are victims. They have been put into environment where they're forced to consume it at times, or they're lured to consume it at times, and then it becomes a habit, and that's how the entire mechanism actually works. I'm sure all of you have seen enough Netflix series to understand about cartels and all of that, so let me not get into, I'm sure all of you understand how that works. So solutions, since you're talking about it, what did I do? I picked up a piece of news that was trending, but I turned it around into a way that was actually information. It gave me more knowledge about drug use and abuse in the country, the laws in the country. And I felt that was somewhere finding a path between agenda and just facts, because that is where I was able to combine the two, combine interest, combine useful information, facts, blend it together and offer you to in a way, and that was actually helpful. If I hope that example was clear about what exactly I mean. If we take a pause and see what all of you are talking about meanwhile. Facts, then agenda. Some are facts, some are agenda. That's right. I'm happy all of you understand it's a mix of both. There is no black and white world. The problem is that most of the time in today's society, people are more interested in news driven more by agenda simply because they find it more entertaining to unfold. Thank you very much. I'm happy you understand that. End users are victims, not perpetrators. Thank you. I understand that as well. Okay, so, right. So that was one example. Let's take up another example, which is a little more complicated when it comes to differentiating between agenda and facts and what's making news. A lot of you wrote about the farm protest, so let's talk about that. Farmers protest. Recently, there was a really sad development that came in. Just yesterday, there was a man who was mutilated right at the scene of the farm protest at Singhu border, which is one of the first ones that really started, right? So again, when it came to the farm protests, what was available for you to see was for everyone to see. But this is a situation where what made news was depending on how prejudiced the person reporting the news was, or how prejudiced the organization perhaps was, and that's what's forcing the person to do so. It was visible very clearly. So what would I do again, since I like to think about solutions in these cases, and I like to think all of you as young budding journalists who are going to be in this situation, and what should you do then? In a situation like that, I would go and talk to as many people as possible, not just make one person, not just, so a person with agenda who was going out and covering the farm protest would think of a line, would pick up one person, any one person in there who would say that, just pick that up, broadcast it, and make that as the big headline, as this is what is happening. One farmer said it, all farmers are saying the same thing. That's agenda. Somebody with facts would talk to not one, not two, not three, but 5 different farmers in 5 different locations from 5 different backgrounds, and then try and say, okay, these are the layers of conversations that are happening here. And that's what brings you this beautiful story of why farmers are protesting, why they're out there in the cold, in the rain, and all of that stuff, right? So this is an example. So if Aryan was an example where it was easy to differentiate between agenda and facts, when it came to the farm protest, it became even more difficult to find out, was this really agenda or are these facts? So, sorry, I seem to have missed my video.
No, we can still see you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so what I'm trying to tell you is that a lot of times that you will see news channels, newsrooms editorially, and I hope you understand now why, being driven towards conversation that are being talked about or hashtag conversations. But what you do with that hashtag, how you treat that so-called gossip that is doing around is on to you. And a lot of times, the blend of the two is what ends up giving you beautiful results. Another example that I can think about, not a recent one, is I told you guys about the story of what happened at Patiala House Court last time, didn't I? Did I? I told you guys what happened at Patiala House Court. 1 second, let me just see. Oh, I haven't.
Yes.
Oh, I haven't. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, so this is going to be a long story. So, I was a young, I'm apparently still a young journalist because the average age is so high that it's like politicians, you're young till you hit that level altogether. So, I was reporting, it was a JNU incident had happened on the recent one back in 2014, 2015, around that time. And I was told by my boss that I would have to, it was a big story. So I was a cub reporter. So I wasn't really the face of it or anything. I was suddenly told one day that you have to go and cover a court hearing, right? So the court hearing, uh, generally what happens is, especially for television, even for print for that matter, is one of the most boring assignments you can get because there's no visual element. Because I'm a a television person. I want to think about visuals. You can't take bites because that's all happening inside the court. So you're left with no elements to play with. So it's said to be one of the most boring things that you can really do. And I was like, oh God, why am I being sent to do this? It was not a hot, in fact, it was in Feb sometime, but it was one of those days and you're feeling really, the weather was really bad and you were like, wow, this was the last thing I really wanted. So I landed up in Patiala House Court, which is a family court in the national capital. And Kanhaiya Kumar was to be brought there for his hearing. Now, this would at any regular day would be this very, very boring thing. Would have been this very, very that people, the accused would be brought in, the court would presume, the judge would listen to arguments on both sides, probably give another date or take a call then. But what happened suddenly inside Patiala House Court was that we were waiting for the judge to arrive, for the accused to be brought in, etc. The courtroom obviously was filled with JNU faculty, all of them standing by and backing Kanhaiya, saying nothing really had gone wrong. And suddenly we see a group of 5, 6 people in black coats enter the courtroom, not the premises, inside the courtroom, and said, Kaun hai aaj JNU se? Whoever is there, we're going to beat them up and teach them a lesson. This is not your Ganga Dhaba. Get out from here. So we were wondering, okay, it must have been like a sporadic thing, but didn't really make any sense. And because all of us were cooped up inside the court, we didn't know what was happening outside. Once these 5, 6 people left, we had the police entered inside the courtroom and they said, oh, whoever is from JNU, just leave, because, things are getting really heated up over here. And we were thinking, what are you saying? This is courtroom. This is not a protest site. Stuff like that doesn't really happen. So anyways, I moved out to see what was happening. And to my horror, I just got outside the courtroom. And in Delhi and Patiala House Court specifically is like this old Haveli, which has been turned into a courtroom. So you have to come out of a corridor and then suddenly you open up into a huge thing. And we came out, we saw some 500 people there at least, who were all sloganeering, who were beating up people outside, all inside a court premises in the national capital, just a stone's throw away from India Gate and very close to the Rashtrapati Bhavan, everything. And they were picking up anybody who looked like a JNU student and bashing them up. They would ask, are you from JNU? Are you from JNU? Before you could answer, they were being slapped around and all of that was gone. And it suddenly dawned up, I had never seen scenes like this. Nobody had, in fact, that very senior journalists standing there as well. And all of them were advised to leave so that they could sanitize the area and get hold of the situation. The JNU faculty, etc., there was a back door open. All of them were escorted out. Some senior journalists also moved out. They were intelligent, perhaps. I was a little like, how can you leave? You need to see what is happening. This can't be done in this manner. So I stayed back. I took out my phone and I started recording what was happening in the court premises out there, just to get some evidence on that how people were just being beaten up for no reason. Sadly, somebody saw me recording that phone, and it was one of those people who were beating. And then I saw these group of people just charge at me and say, take her phone, take her phone. I ran inside the courtroom, and there was me and there was this one other person who was one other journalist who was there. And both of us are there inside the courtroom at this moment. And we have this group of people attack you, come in front of you like that and say, give your phone. Otherwise, we'll break your phone and we'll break your bones. पहले हड्डी तोड़ेंगे मैडम, फिर आपका फोन भी तोड़ेंगे, तो आप फोन दे दीजिए और डिलीट कर दीजिए आपने जो वीडियो लिया है उससे. They just didn't want any evidence to be going out, because who were they? These were, a lot of them later turned out to be supporters of a particular political party. They were against JNU, and they didn't even want that hearing to take place at that moment. It was one of those moments for me, and why I'm telling you guys these stories, that it was one of those moments for me where, as a journalist, you get very used to seeing threats online and stuff like that. But physically, like this, doesn't happen. And especially inside a courtroom, nobody dreams of it. Nobody dreams of being threatened with their life and their bones being broken inside a courtroom. That was happening. What happened to me after that is something that I'll tell you towards the end of our session as well. But the reason I brought out this story is because when I got out, it took me a while to understand why things had unfolded the way they had unfolded. And in television, what happens is you have no time to even process. When I was out, when I finally got out, and the first thing I wanted to do was just call up office and let them know what had happened. I remember there was a lot of anger inside me at that moment to say, this happened. How can these people do this, etc. And then I had to quickly tell myself, okay, this is information that I'm going out to a wider audience. So let's just come back to facts first, and then we'll decode it as we go. So I narrated my story exactly word by word, minute by minute, how I just told you guys. On this what happened, this what happened, this what happened, this what happened. Those are facts. And then suddenly, after having understood that, after also getting a moment to get a grip on myself and emotions, I've never cried at work or howled at work. That was one moment when I couldn't understand what was happening with my body. I was so shell-shocked, and so I just didn't know what was happening. I just could not believe what had just taken place. And we told that story, and once that story was out as well, it was thanks to those little clippings that I had managed to pick up on my phone that there was actually a case against those people. When this story had happened, and when I came out and told my story, I keep wondering, why are there so few people who managed to report what was happening inside? Why are there so few people who came out to state the facts over there? Was it deliberate that a lot of organizations did not cover it? Was it deliberate that, was there an agenda at play? And so many years down the line now, when I look back at that story, I think about how at that moment, or in stories like these, when you see a very clear conflict of interest, or when you see a very clear clash of ideologies, left versus right, and stuff like that happen, it is very difficult to put out in terms of reportage what is right and what is wrong. In JNU, similar incident had happened. Lights had been taken off. Recent one I'm talking about, lights had been cut off and people were beaten up black and blue, and then they were caught on camera being escorted out by police. Same police who did not come to save us when we were crying out for help in that courtroom and saying, oh, I'm a journalist. I remember flashing my card and saying, well, I'm a journalist, and how can you do this to me? Can you not get hold of them? You guys are 5 people. There are 5 people. Why can't you just take them out? The police just walked out. They didn't stay back to hear what we were saying. They just walked out. I remember that scene because I was in the corner of the courtroom. There was this one other journalist with me. And then we have a group of lawyers over here. And then we have about 5 policemen in uniform with their sticks in hand. And I'm screaming out to them that, hey, look, my card over here. And they just walked out. And that's when the fear really sets into you and you feel, oh, you're on your own. There is nobody coming to save you on this day. So in experiences like these and getting a brush with such cold realities of our country, of our beautiful country, of our still evolving country, it makes you very sour. And I think a lot of times, some people who've experienced it very up close make it their personal agenda to make news a particular way, make their personal agenda to make conversation a particular way, which is wrong as well. circling back to why I told you this story, I'm going back to the first thing I told you, that agenda is not often organizational, uh, not often coming in. It's just personal prejudices at times that come out in play as well. Agenda is what came out in play, of personal prejudices coming out in play beautifully when the Nirbhaya gang rape had happened. Reporters, I remember standing next to me outside Safdarjung Hospital, were saying stuff like, joking when they were not on air. Reporters, mind you, joking. And when her picture had just surfaced for the first time, we had decided not to float it around. Obviously, it was a sexual crime, and you're not allowed under the law of the land to do so. And when all of us had access, of course, to it, and then they were seeing it, and they were like, "Oh, she was not even that pretty. Why was she?" There were other reporters, male reporters, who were coming out and saying stuff like, well, and doctors had said this, and we had realized this, that the reason the brutality that happened to Nirbhaya was because she was fighting back, because she kept biting their hand. The guy still had the mark of her teeth, because she was pushing back and saying, "You cannot do this to me. This is my body. You don't get to empower it in this manner." And because she fought back, they went more brutal on her. That is what the doctors and all the later analysis of it had also told us. And then there were people, good intentioned reporters, I would feel, but their opinion, had she not, she would have still been alive. She should have just not fought back in this manner. So people with prejudices, people with upbringing, it's like how they say about judges. Your upbringing plays such huge role in how you write judgments. I believe reporters and reporting is not talked about that much, but this is also one profession where your upbringing, where school of thought you come from, where the experiences you've had both before your reporting years and after your reporting years plays a huge role, and at times comes down to shaping your opinion. And that colors your opinions at times, and that makes you sour. At times it makes you personal agenda driven, etc., etc. The way out of it, it's very human to feel these things. The way out of it is perhaps to try and read about and feel not your experiences, but look, read, talk to people with other experiences as well, and then get a complete picture. Understand there are so many others like you out there who are also feeling this way. On that note, let me take a pause over here and invite some questions. And let me also get some better lighting. I think it's become a little dark.
Well, thank you so much, ma'am. That has been really absolutely very, very interesting. You've really kind of hit home the point about agenda and facts. And I think it's very beautifully narrated through those examples given. And definitely you do have a heart of metal and the strength to have endured all of that and gone ahead and continued with the profession. So congratulations on that. And I think there are some students here who also have actually commended you on your bravery in the chat box. Meanwhile, there are a few questions actually. In fact, there are 3 questions of a similar kind. One was from YouTube that asked about what is the number 1 rule for all journalists, and 2 others who even asked about what is the number 1 rule for aspiring journalists. So over to you, ma'am.
Number 1 rule to become a journalist, to want to become a journalist, is to ensure that you will have no Saturday, Sundays, you will have no off days, you will be working. And we all remember that beautiful picture of a journalist during an earthquake. I think it was China, or was it Japan, if I'm getting that wrong. And in a wedding dress, she went and she wanted to get some reporting out. That, for me, is the picture of journalism. So a number 1 rule of journalism is that it is not a job, it is not a profession. It is
a commitment.
No, I have talked about this so many times, but I often pause when I think about it. It is a way of life. You have to incorporate it, you have to live it, and you have to, and commitment is not something that people can force into you. It has to come from within. If you're not okay with that, journalism is, you won't last very long, to put it mildly, over there. So people now looking at me right now must be wondering, oh, she sits in studios with makeup and stuff. How is she telling us all these things? Well, I still work at times on Holi, Diwali, my birthday, my anniversary. I upset a lot of people at home because I'm called into work. And I do that because that's what the job demands. And before, again, if you've heard this entire broadcast, you would know that before I got into that chair and sat pretty with my makeup on, I had to go through pretty tough times. So, there are lots of colleagues, senior to me, older to me, more experienced than me, who continue to do this every day after day. When you go out to cover these things, it's so understanding that journalism is not something that you do for money, understanding that journalism is not something that you do for fame or connection or lust for power, or just trying to be close to power, as a lot of people have thought about it. Journalism is pure love for observing people, of understanding people, of telling people stories. It could be politics, it could be cricket, it could be entertainment. They're all human beings at the end of the day, and you have to tell their story. And you have to not just tell your story, you have to inspire people and ensure that that information is useful to them. So that, in a nutshell, is the number one rule. It was not number one. I think it was top 10. I've said all top 10 now, all those things that are required.
So there's another question here that says, ma'am, does keeping up with every recent news and trend ever get exhausting?
Oh, talk about it. But in your language, once, if you're a true blood journalist, you'll understand that you get FOMO if you're not keeping up with times. I think that's what happens. So you're wired in a particular way to know and keep up with what is going to happen. So I don't think it ever is exhausting. What's exhausting is the gravity of things. For example, when the COVID second wave was on, in a long time, I remember finding it so tough to wake up every morning and go to work. It was very tough because it was not just what you were seeing on the streets. It was not just what you were seeing in the hospital. It was this helplessness of not being able to help anybody, not even your own family members at times, people you know at times. And the peak of that helplessness began when the oxygen crisis happened, when hospitals would call us up and say that, ma'am, we have 10 minutes of oxygen left. What do we do? Please do something. And that in children's hospital, where they're all breathing because of that oxygen concentrator working or the machine working. And that not in 10 minutes, if the oxygen supply is not put in, that 50, 60, 100, 200 people there would all be just gone like that. That was very exhausting. That was very, very hard. And it made us feel so helpless because we felt, with all our contacts, with people who had all the money in the world, nobody could do anything. It was that time. And it was a very humbling experience for us. But again, I like to see at the bright side, and I would say that in most cases, we were able to help hospitals. Most cases when hospitals reached out to us and said that we had only this much, and because hospitals were tracking it as well, they would tell us at this border, this truck is shut, we were able to call up and we were able to put pressure on the police, put pressure on the governments to say, just release it, stop playing this game on which state gets what. You have to just fill in. We're all one here. This is one India, and everybody deserves that oxygen, and you have to just start looking at those things. I think that pressure worked, and in most cases, we managed to sail through it. At times just in time, but we managed. So yes, there are times when it gets very, very difficult to cope up with news. But I guess once you get past that, you feel that at least you did a tiny bit, and you go to bed thinking at least you did a tiny bit to help someone, and that should be Good. Just give me one moment while you get more questions, ma'am. It's getting really dark around me.
Okay, yeah, sure. Please, go ahead.
Delhi's beginning to get into winter mode, so I'll just get some light on. Just give me a moment.
Please do get ahead, yeah.
Ma'am Rose, you must pick that one question. Does your profession take a toll on the last question in the chat?
Last question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Yes. So meanwhile, as we wait for Ma'am Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor to be back, I think students, you're doing an amazing, students and all our guests who have actually logged into the session, you're asking some amazing questions. So please do go ahead. Yes. So
Father was saying something I heard in the middle, a question he was talking about.
Yes. The question here is, does your profession take a toll on your mental health, and what do you do to help yourself? So one of the students has asked that, yeah.
I think recently with the examples that I've given you, you know that it does take a toll on your mental health. It doesn't leave you. Those cry for helps don't leave you. Personal experiences, they don't leave you at times. And so it's important. A lot of my colleagues who covered, I remember going to Nepal for the earthquake that had happened there. And when we had come back, we'd been advised by doctors to actually take mental health, because we'd seen devastation at a very different level. We had seen, and Nepal was a very different experience where physically you felt that you didn't know whether you're going to live, not live, because even that one hotel that was still in place and all of us were bunked in there. It was like one of those movies that you see where there's just one surviving. In war movies, is one surviving hotel and everybody's bunked in there, every corner taken up. That was our thing in Nepal. And in the middle of the night, we were always, I remember going to sleep with a bag on me like this, with a backpack on me like this, because middle of the night there would suddenly be some another earthquake or a small one or whatever would come in, and we would again just rush out. The minute that would happen, we'd again rush out on the road and stand there and wait for it to pass. And we used to be so exhausted through the day, because we would be out, we would be reporting, we would be catching up things, and coming back, we couldn't even we didn't know if this hotel is going to stand the next day or what's going to happen. A lot of my colleagues, I remember, were so fearful that you didn't know if the hotel would come down as well. They would sleep in cars on the road, thinking that, at least this is going to be one safe place. So, and talking about Nepal, the earthquake there, one thing still strikes me. There's a very famous temple there. And I was one of the helicopter sorties. They were taking a look of the entire situation there. Indian Air Force was there, and they were dropping down supplies in areas. People who were stuck, they were picking them up, airlifting them and taking them to the base camp as well. All of that was happening, and I was in one of those sorties taking place. And at that temple, they were last rites of people were being performed. And the officer, the pilot of that helicopter was telling me, this area. I was like, what is this place? I couldn't make up. I was like, what is this place? There's constantly some smoke coming out of there. What is happening? He's like, oh, that's a temple. That's a place, sort of a cremation ground as well. That was where bodies were being burned, and they were being burnt 24/7. It just kept going and on and on and on. And people were waiting, like how we saw in the second wave as well. People were waiting for one body to burn out so that another could take its place. So experiences like that, what you see, what you hear, that doesn't leave you. I remember that was one particular incident where we came back and we were advised by doctors to go see someone, talk to a therapist, ensure that we were mentally all right. And it was good advice. Some of us had taken it as well. After the second wave, I felt we just didn't even have the time to take the time off and go back and see someone. But it has. But I just want to take this moment over here to say that we are in a very beautiful time in our mental health journey in the country. I think it's no longer a taboo, and and I just also want to say at this moment, it's not just for journalists like me who at times need mental health experts. I think anybody who's going through, who's even just watching all this on the sidelines and is feeling something should take help, it is very useful, and there is no shame in it. So if any one of you are also feeling it right now, I would just urge you to do that. Just taking a moment to say it's not just us, it's everybody who's felt something or the other. The sense of loss is of course there for everyone. So yeah, whenever I feel a breakdown, I try to take help if I'm feeling that let down. Otherwise, most days I try to count my blessings. I try to count on the stories, good stuff that we've done, and the blessings that we get from people as well. That keeps me sane. That feels like on most days my balance sheet says, every time I go back to sleep, most days my balance sheet says that the good stuff done and the stories and the lives that have been impacted in a positive way outweigh all the negative stuff out there. So we're on the right track. So that gives you good sleep.
Well, thank you. That was really very well said. And thank you also to Yarik W. Sawton for asking that particular question. We shall now take a question from YouTube. The question says, good evening, ma'am. I'm really inspired by your stories. How can we differ between individuals, organizations who cover news based on an agenda and those who cover news based on facts?
Oh, I wish there was a liometer, like one of those shows that Karan Johar does. No, every time somebody said, you could just press it and say, wrong. I wish it was. But frankly, it's on you. You got to see enough stuff and understand it. You got to see enough stuff to know what is news and what is agenda. Hopefully this talk that we've had today will help you understand what is news and what is agenda, and you'll become better, more informed viewers, and you will decide to not use your time, money, energy, subscription on platforms which are not giving you that balance, and platforms which are only driven by agenda.
Great. And now I think I'd like to club two questions together, actually. One is from Barak KH Rolu, who asks, ma'am, what is the best thing to do when things get violent during work? And the other question is from Leonard Ekka, who asks, how do you handle criticism that comes your way, maybe from people and sometimes from your own peer work group?
Oh, okay. Two very different questions. Let me take the first one by Barak, who talks about what is the best way to, sorry, what was that again? Let me just read that.
Yes. What is the best thing to do when things get violent during your work?
So I actually went through, my organization sent me through, after this Patiala House Code incident, by the way, I was sent for a training where very experienced journalists had come, and they had given us a full 2-day, 3-day training on what to do when workplace gets violent. It was by journalists who had covered in Syria, Afghanistan, and stuff like that. So I went through an entire sort of training program post my experience to understand if I could have done something better, but very broadly, unless you are in a combat zone, because that requires another level of training and experience. In a day-to-day, because people are getting, opinions are so polarized these days, day-to-day, that you don't just get into a street fight. I guess the thing to do is not to impose your opinion on others, and understand when to stop talking, and understand that you can't change people's mindset. You can only hold on to your own. So if you think that the other person is looking for a fight, if you think the other person is wanting to push through an agenda, the sensible thing to do is to withdraw. Okay, the second question, let me go to that.
How do you handle criticism that comes your way from people and sometimes from your own peer work group?
Well, get comfortable with it. That's, I think that's one of the basic duty calls over there. Just get comfortable. You're in especially now, I think this is something journalists about 10 years ago also didn't have to face. But now with Instagram, with Twitter, with all of these things and instant reactions that you get from people, So I have two ways to deal with it, and it's a very personal thing. I really don't know what's the right thing for everyone, because I think every human being is different. They have their own ways to protect themselves and respond to news. But how I do it is don't I don't get affected by anonymous posts. I In my inner circle, I've marked that out in my head very clearly on people whose opinion will matter to me, and these are not just yes men. These are not just people who will always praise me. Um, I have a circle and a support group of people who I go to for advice, who give me feedback and stuff like that. So their opinion matters. But anonymous people just writing anything on Twitter to get a reaction out of me um, doesn't make a difference.
Okay. So we have another question from Muskan Biswa. So she starts off by saying that, ma'am, you are truly inspiring at such a young age, you have achieved so much. And then she asks two questions. How do you keep a check of it, I guess, your professional life, and maintain your professional life so well? And she also asks, when did it spark in you to take up journalism as a career?
Very accidentally. I was a no good student when I was in school. Well, it's a very bad story to tell in an institution. And I was one of those who never got good marks as well. But listen to your teachers. Because my professor, so in school, I was always this person who was debating, who was doing extracurricular activities, but I just couldn't get science and math. I think I was never meant for stuff like that. It never interested me too deep, and I was very distracted by these other things and debates that were happening. So debates, elocutions, quizzes, anything which is extracurricular I was always there, and I was winning lots of awards for my school and stuff like that. When it came to college, by that time I realized that I had no idea. I was not one of those people who knew from a very early age that I wanted to be a journalist. No, for the most part of my even college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had the clarity that I wanted to study something that interested me, because so far till 10th and 12th standard, I was studying stuff that didn't interest me so much. So I really wanted to pick up history and pick up political science on how countries are governed and how countries evolve and how polities and politics evolve. That always interested me. So I wanted to continue studying it. And this part of the story is great to be talking about in colleges. I had a professor, my political science professor, who pushed me to start writing down what I was feeling and my experience. And I started writing for the college paper. I then landed up with an internship with the local paper. While I was in college, in my first year, just in my first year, I was already writing for, I was helping Times of India launch a new paper in a different city. So I started getting on with the work. So by the time I finished college, I pretty much knew everything that was going on in print and how stories were built and how stories were written and developed, etc. So I thought after college, let's give TV a try. So I took up an internship at NDTV. And yeah, from an intern to now an editor here.
That's actually a very beautiful story, because I think it's a good lesson for our students to know that sometimes you don't really need to know right away what you need to be doing in life. That's fine. You don't need to be stressed about that. But the moment you do get a focus in place, I think it's good to move ahead and get going with it.
Yeah. No, I just, if I could add in there.
Yes, please.
There is also nothing wrong in knowing very early that you want to do something. There is nothing wrong in that.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people who are very focused in the way they approach things. And that is also beautiful. This is just my story. And I've had some troubled emails from students earlier when I was speaking. So I just want to state this out there, that my story does not have to be your story. Your story is your story. It's going to be unique. But I'm just saying that with plan or without plan, as long as you've got your heart in what you're doing, and it's just not a college paper, but it's something that keeps you talking in your canteen as well. If you're studying political science, if you want to talk about how China developed in your free time with students, you're in the right job. If you're studying math, for God's sake, if you're studying coding, whatever it might be, if in your free time, your mind is calculating new ideas, if you're excited about it, you're in the right profession, or you're in the right course at least, and you're going to pave a path for yourself. You just got to understand what excites you. That's very basic. It's very, very basic stuff of knowing that you're in the right place.
Lovely, lovely. Very well said. We have Prapti K. Barua, who wants to know, what is something that you seek in new and young journalists?
This could be another seminar. So I love working with young people, by the way. And my team is also very, very young. Both the team that works on FII, my show, and even the crypto team, very, very young people. And I love interacting with young minds, understanding how they are thinking. But it's also quite a challenge to adapt to new ways, I think. But when I look for young people, I think I'm just seeking commitment these days, because in this world full of distractions, I feel people excited at times. I've seen very enthused, very excited, good at their job people also, but then they just lose interest and they go away. And they just, a lot of times, because it's not very, it takes time, especially journalism is, or any profession for that matter, I've been told at least now, it takes time to get to a space where you truly begin to enjoy things. It's a lot of toil before that. And it's those years of toil that you have to stand through. I don't see a lot of people having the patience to see it through till they get that first story. They come in and they feel like, oh, we're just transcribing, oh, we're just researching, oh, I'm getting no FaceTime, oh, I'm not getting any thing to, and they just quit and they go away. I think when I meet young people, if they're committed, if I give them a job, or if they've been assigned a job and they have the mental strength to see that job through, I think I'm sold on those people, because skill is something I can teach them. My experiences they can learn from. How to do the work also is something that you can learn and adapt very quickly. But commitment to your job, I can't inculcate. That has to come from here. And as long as that's there, very happy to mentor people.
We actually have a very interesting question here, from Barak KH Rolu, who asks, what do you do when news is intertwined with religious opinions? People tend to act in extreme measures in matters like these, I assume.
Yeah, and Barak is very opinionated as well. Isn't this like the third or the fourth question that I've got? Okay. So this is about what do you do with news when news is intertwined with religious opinions? People tend to act in extreme measures. Well, I have one religion, and that religion is the news. And my religion tells me, look at facts first, report about people who are unheard of and are underprivileged first. Give your mic and space and your platform to people who generally don't have a voice. And those are the three pillars of my religion. That's all that matters.
That's really very well said. I think I shall take this question next. What major challenge did you face during your last role? How did you handle it? And this question is from Fabrian M. Momin.
In your last role, I'm not sure if I follow that.
I think she probably meant, he probably meant means the last coverage that you had to probably do of some very intense news story.
You guys want to hear more sob stories? I just gave you like 2-3 today.
I think you're a lovely storyteller, and it's always inspiring and encouraging, I guess.
Last story, I think it'll have to be about COVID. In fact, okay, the last story that I covered was refugees coming in from Afghanistan, actually. And that was something. It was, it also had a religious overtone to it. It was about how there were a lot of women over there. And I'll just leave you with this. I don't think we have enough time for a full story right now, but I'll just leave you with this. Imagine packing your entire life in one suitcase. Try and do that exercise when you go back home today. Pack everything. And you don't have parents, you don't have anybody, you're just one person. And imagine packing your entire life in one suitcase. And a life which was quite nice in your homeland and then just leaving it all and coming it to a new place. It takes a lot, and those people deserve so much love and support, which is not there, sadly, being given to them, considering India has their own constraints and India is still struggling with our own hunger index. And but just that story did get me. When I met these people, it got me very worried. A lot of them, part of the family was here, part of the family was still stuck there, and the guilt that you were the one who traveled and the other ones did not. And will you ever see them again? Will you not? What's happening to them because there's no mode of communication? You are in this foreign land, you don't know anybody. It's it requires some time and perspective.
The next question is, I think this is from Father. Yeah. What do you have the most being a journalist, and what do you miss the most as a journalist?
What do you have most being a journalist, and what do you miss most? What I have most is a voice that all of you are here today to listen to me. And hopefully I'm doing a good job with that voice and I'm able to raise the right issues. What I miss is right now on a Saturday, just chilling with my family, maybe go for a game of golf and chill with them. And perhaps, yeah, but if I have to be honest, I don't miss it much. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And that's that. I miss most times not being home much, not being with my parents much, not being in my town much. And yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know what you were looking for, Father.
Correct.
It's very basic.
Yeah, that's a frank question. Nice, good answer. Right.
I like how he's saying correct, as if this is an exam.
We are used to taking exams.
I know.
Thanks.
All right. I think it's any closing comments, guys? Yeah.
So, okay, I think there might be, can we take like one more question? There seems to be another slightly interesting question that somebody put up just now. And then probably there have been a lot of comments actually that have been pouring about how amazing your
last question. Last question.
Ma'am, when there are cover-ups or a scandal of a big celebrity used to cover the real problem to divert people's attention, what do you do during these times? I think she means what your approach is. This is Nafi.
What do I do during these times? Well, I would like to believe that I'm not falling in for that cover up. I would like to believe I'm not falling in for the agenda. And going back to our issue of the day, I'm still looking at facts. So the first thing that people talk to me and how they approach me these days is, oh, this happened. They'll either say, oh, Aryan is such an innocent, or they'll say he's this. And I want to keep going back to, well, what exactly happened? What are the facts in this case? So scandal, cover up, whatever it is, I would like to see it as a story of an individual. Just take the first and the second name out of it. Just make it like an algorithm in your head that A was caught at B place doing C. And if that narrative is making sense, it's going to be simple.
That's great. Lovely. Wonderful. Thank you so much for so patiently answering all of these questions and spending this time with our students. And there have been a lot of comments actually on the chat box, and that have really been commending the work that you've done, and also for all the answers that you've actually given. So we have approached the end of this session today. And as always, we are absolutely happy that Ma'am Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor could actually make some time and be here with us today and answer all of our questions and tell us more of her stories. So to end this session, there are a few people that I would definitely like to thank. Before I do thank our guest of honor, that is Ms. Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor, I would like to extend my gratitude to Reverend Brother Principal Brother Albert Longley Dakar for his support. And also, we'd like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Reverend Father Gervasius Nongse. He was here with us for the welcome address in the last session. And Dr. Daman Lingdo from the IQAC, who also delivered the vote of thanks in the last session. I would like to thank Professor Nathaniel Nampui Majau, who is hiding behind one of these screens today, but he is the man who does all of this, who helps us out with putting these shows on board online, and without his technical expertise and help, we would have definitely not have had this show. I would definitely like to thank all the students, the staff, and all the guests who joined us and made this interaction so very lively. And once again, before I go on to thank our resource person of the day, I would like to thank the most important person, I think, who made it possible for us to bring Ms. Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor, despite a really busy schedule, to come here and address our students. It is none other than our rector himself, Reverend Father Dr. Joby Joseph. He's always very, very meticulous about the resource person that he chooses to come and address the students from various fields. And it was his idea and it was his brainchild that we have to have Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor over to talk to our students because of the lovely journalism and reporting and coverage that she has been doing over the years for all the different stories that we have seen her on TV. And I must say that he did everything possible. And I think he maneuvered his way around through all the loopholes, made all the necessary.
Oh, you bet.
And then, yes, and then actually established our contact with Miss Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor. And so we have had here with us for not just one, but for two extremely interactive and lovely, lovely sessions. So definitely an absolute...
Happy to. Very happy to come back.
Yes, for sure. So an absolute thank you.
Next in person, Sonal.
Yeah, wouldn't that be lovely? I would love to come to Shillong.
Yeah, please.
I think that would be really nice to have you here in person. You would get a completely different perspective also, I believe, different things.
Yeah, I think we've had enough of Zoom calls by now. I would love to have some FaceTime, the actual FaceTime with people.
Yes.
Yeah,
sure. That's true. And of course, so thanking our really, really wonderful resource person today, Ms. Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor. Absolutely lovely. Your stories are always inspiring. You are definitely, I'm not just saying this for the sake of saying, you are really a very beautiful storyteller. And I think Father Joby made the right choice, because even on TV, when we hear you cover different stories, you make it absolutely engaging and you really want us to listen and find out and discover more. So thank you so much for sparing your time and for being here with us. And we do hope that you keep soaring higher in the field of journalism. And sometimes it is so nice in this day and age when you know that news is being sold off with politics and corporatization. It is nice to know that we still have journalists like you who still in their small, tiny little ways try to make an endeavor to keep the profession alive.
There are lots like me. I'm not the only one. There are so many more that you're yet to discover. And I hope so many more to come from your college as well. And like I said right in the beginning, we need more people. We need more committed, right people in this profession. It is really important for this legacy to go on. So I really hope we have that. And thank you. I absolutely loved being here. And if I've not been able to answer any question, please hit me up. I'm very easily on Instagram, on Twitter. I'm always there responding to people's questions. So very happy to do that for all of you as well.
Lovely. That's so inspiring. Thank you once again. So,
all right.
Yes, a very good evening and a very good night to everybody. And thank you once again for being here with us. Thank you so much, ma'am.
All right. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonal. So, Nathaniel, you can just post your attendance once more because the link was...
Oh.
You can say. Yeah. Just
should I still say it?
Yeah, you can say, because students will be online.
Okay, so to all the students who are still online, please make sure that you fill in the feedback form, and you will also be receiving your e-certificates as soon as you do that. Thank you so very much. Okay.